All right, we are live on the Dedicated Show. Hello, everybody. My name is Kate Strashny, the founder of Dedicated, and I will be your host for today's show. This is the 15th episode of my goal to have 100 live shows on the Dedicated Show this year. So, really excited that we have yet another amazing guest. His name is Timothy Scott Clendaniel, and I actually had him on the show almost 5 years ago in person. It was July 2019. We have plenty of funny stories from that live event. It was one of my first live events as well. Back in the day, we had to live stream in person. StreamYard wasn't really a thing yet, or maybe I just didn't know about it. But yeah, we had a great time. So we're bringing him back on the show. And today we're going to talk about AI and machine learning, and we're doing it wrong. So Scott's here to tell us everything we're doing wrong, and hopefully he'll talk about a couple of things that we could improve on and how we can do things right. Before I bring him on the show, I want to remind you that this is a live show. So if you've got questions, you've got comments, you want to talk to me, to Scott, let us know in the chat. Tell us where you're tuning in from. If you disagree with something Scott says, let him know. He likes to prove things. I see him backstage looking very confused right now. You don't see him, but I do. All right, without further ado, I'm going to bring Scott up on our stage. Hey, how's it going?
Hello,
everyone. So Scott, do you remember our first live show?
I do. It was about 9,000 degrees, and it was in the Empire State Building, and I was actually in New York for something else.
Yep.
And I thought, 12 blocks away. I'm thinking Baltimore City blocks, which are no, these are New York City blocks, which are like that. So I'm walking. It's like that scene in Poltergeist when the mom's going down the hallway. I'm not getting any closer. Come in. I am drenched with sweat. I look like a homeless person who just ran a marathon in a three-piece. I'm like, hi, Kate. Recording now. It was awesome.
That was exactly it. So like I mentioned, it was one of my first lives, right? We haven't met before. And so Scott shows up and I'm like, there's this strange man. It was very sweaty.
The strange part she got right, by the way. That was absolutely, she nailed that.
He's like, hey, I'm in town. And I'm like, you know what? I'm in the city, so we can meet at the Empire State Building. LinkedIn used to let me host live shows there, so it felt safe enough. There was security around, so I end up letting him in to the building. So before we actually get into our topic, I'm going to play a 30-second clip from the beginning of that show just to set the stage. Hold on.
All
right, LinkedIn, here we are.
Yay, team.
Going live on LinkedIn with T. Scott
Clendaniel, not Clendaniel.
Not yes. Clendaniel, no.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about data science for mortals. So if you're tuning in, and if you're a mortal, and if you have questions on data science, please go ahead and ask them in the chat, and I will ask them to Scott, who knows everything. So,
if you're immortal, no questions accepted.
Exactly. So, and now you're wearing the same shirt that I was wearing. I love that. We swapped outfits as well, so that was fun.
See, we coordinate our costumes, but 5 years apart. So
Yeah, so July in New York City, that was a really, really hot day. I'm glad we went through with it. And the reason we were, well, at least I was laughing so hard is because I was new to live streaming, and if you remember, Scott, I forgot to click go live. And we did a whole intro. I was already nervous, and I'm like, I did a whole intro. And he starts talking, and I'm like, I forgot to go live. So you're like, oh, great, let's do it again. So it was a lot.
And it was a couple minutes too. And she cut out the interpretive dance section, which really disappointed me because I have my moves.
You could do it right now. Go ahead. Oh, there you go. So, well, Scott, for people who have not met you yet and don't know you, tell them a little bit about yourself. What are you doing right now? Talk about your career. I know you recently had a major change in your career. So I'll give you the stage for a couple minutes. Tell us about Scott.
Once upon a time. No. First of all, I am older than dirt. I started in this field March the 3rd of 1986. So I'm coming up on my 38th anniversary in analytics. Spent a lot of time in financial services. Been involved in analytics all the way through. Moved into consulting 2000, give or take. A lot of consulting, a lot of teaching and training. And then as of November, I have left the corporate world to go full-time into teaching and training to try and bring more people into data science.
That's it?
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. You know.
That's a very quick background. So you left the corporate world. What happened?
Could
No.
slower.
Sorry, we had a little delay on Scott's side. It must be StreamYard. I don't know what's happening.
Well, and if you ever notice that if you ever get stuck on one of these, it's always with you've got a pose on your face like this.
I know. Why is that?
I don't know.
I was on a call. I think it was Christina, and she's like, I'm taking a screenshot. And she sent it to me. Statopoulos. Yeah, Christina, I'm calling you out. She took a screenshot. She's like, I'm going to send it to you. It looks really bad. I'm like, why are you sending it to me? So I told her I'm going to make it my LinkedIn profile. I could. She didn't tell me I should. So.
It would be a conversation starter.
Oh, look, George is here. Lights on data. So you know George.
Hello!
You know you sound like
you're following George Farrakhan and Lights on Data.
He puts the lights on data.
He does indeed.
Lots of flashlights.
With lattes and cats. So, I mean, what more could you want?
I know. You can't ask for more. So you left the corporate world. Why? Is this, I know we're talking about like how everything's going wrong in AI and we're doing everything wrong. Is this why you decided to venture off on your own?
A couple of things. I finally got tired of providing consulting in situations where I was able to prove the results, but organizations weren't actually able to implement them. And where my heart lies is more with bringing more people into the field and stop doing the exclusionary thing. One of my former bosses used to refer to them as the bro-grammers instead of the programmers, who are like, no, you're not sufficiently brilliant to enter.
You don't want to be a programmer?
And I am not a great developer. DBA I can do. SQL I'm in, but the coding thing not so much. We
have this on record. Scott is not a good developer. Well, but I'm sure you're good at other things.
You broke me down on the stand. It's like Perry Mason. Okay, go ahead.
You're good at teaching, right? You love educating. Tell us more.
Absolutely do. I'll give you a quick example. I did a teaching exercise for Legg Mason, which was purchased by Franklin Templeton. And we had about 1,100 employees, and 150 of those employees attended 4 consecutive sessions, giving up their lunch times to go and do this. So after the session, a young woman comes up to me and says, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" in this tiny little voice. And I was like, "Sure." So we sit down, talking for a couple of minutes, and she bursts into tears. It's like, "Oh my heavens, what did you do wrong?" And she says, "You're the first person in this organization to have taken me seriously."
Aww.
Broke my heart. And I said, "Well, what do you want to do?" She says, "I want to do this. I want to build models." So took her on in an internship, and she was building neural networks 6 weeks later, was able to change her career from administrative assistant to risk analyst. Fortunate because there were tons of layoffs that came down the pike, but she was able to continue her career. That is probably my favorite memory out of my entire career, was being able to help somebody else move into what they wanted to do.
It's always that one moment, right? That's pivotal. That changes everything. Well, that's great. And you're doing something you actually love and you're helping people.
Yep. And by the way, she did the work. I'm not claiming that I'm Joe Miracle, but the problem was no one would give her the opportunity.
Sometimes that's all you need, right? Yep. And I know you're not taking credit for it, but if you hadn't given her the opportunity, she might have never taken that step.
Probably at that time, probably not.
Yeah. So now Analytics Edge, what is that? What are you doing?
Analytics Edge is the LLC that I created many years ago to be able to do B2B contracting when I was doing contract consulting. And so that is sort of continued on. And that is also the platform that I launch a lot of my training efforts and speaking engagements through. So. Okay,
nice. All right. So we're here to talk about AI, machine learning, and we're doing everything wrong. The stage is yours.
Everything. Absolutely everything. No.
What are we doing? I feel like we've come so far. So what's going on?
Yeah, I think part of the issue is the fact that there is a very small group of people in the analytics, data science, machine learning community who have sort of come up through the ranks as software developers, which is fantastic, but they very much want to keep the field closed. If you don't come up with that same type of programming background that they had, they sort of look down on you, and they're sort of like, we are the oracles of all the stuff that's important. You're not allowed to touch code. You're not allowed to touch anything. And if you can't code everything from a terminal, you're no good. And it isn't a lot of people, but those people are really loud, and they exclude a lot of folks from entering the field. And I think there is too much focus on how to code and not enough focus on how to solve problems. You need code, not arguing that. But if you don't know what problem you're solving, that's sort of a problem. So Kate, I have a question for you. You ready? You braced?
No.
All right.
I gotta go.
Okay, well, it was a fun show. Hope everyone had a wonderful time. All right.
What's your question?
So as you're streaming, what coding language are you using? You're probably,
I don't know, Python?
you're probably using an app, I would hope.
No, I'm just saying, like, it's probably running on Python. That's what I would assume.
Most of us do not send our email through a command line. Most of us do not write presentations from a command line.
Don't assume or generalize like that. Guys, those in the audience.
Okay, well, fine. Okay. But no one has ever asked me what coding language I use to create a presentation. And the reason why is we all use apps. The whole point of software development and developing applications is to remove those manual components and not have to reinvent the wheel every single time.
Of course.
And this is caught off on across the board, except in many of the areas of data science and machine learning. I am all for IDEs. If you can do it from a command line, fantastic. But if you're trying to get more people to take advantage of analytics, you can't do it by saying, okay, well, you need to understand statistics and linear algebra, and you need to be able to code, and you need to be able to do the following 30 things. Remember the job descriptions in the beginning of data science? You know, they're like 12 paragraphs long, and no one could meet all those requirements. I think we need to bring more people into the field, and we're going to have to allow a little bit more of the no code, low code, so that we can get people to support it and take advantage of it. The other thing is, one of the great things that we're doing right is Gen AI. And I think one of the reasons is, what does the interface remind anyone of? Text messages. You're basically sending text messages.
Yeah, that's true. You're having a conversation.
To the computer. You know, there's no code. You don't even have to fool with learning a GUI interface. If you can type and read, you're in pretty good shape.
Well, or you don't even have to type. You could just do speech to text at this point. You can just talk to it.
Do that too.
By the way, I was right. You were wrong. Dustin, thank you. He manages his day-to-day activities using the command line. So
Dustin, you're not helping me, Dustin. No, that's
Dustin's on my side. So we don't have enough people. Is that part of the problem?
I think that a lot of people have decided, or a small number of very loud people have decided that they are the gatekeepers to the field.
Okay.
And are very dismissive. And I have a secret suspicion that some core of those were our fellow 14-year-old nerds, I was one, at the cafeteria table that no one would sit with. And they got really resentful. So now they're like, okay, well, now I know something that you don't know. You don't have access to what I know. So now I'm going to reverse the situation. And that's just really unfortunate. I think we would be in such better shape if we allowed more people to take advantage of things.
Okay.
I remember when email came out? And when email first came out, organizations were like, no, we cannot have email. No, what if they wrote the wrong thing? Okay. When we first had the advent of spreadsheets back in the early 1980s, what if they typed in the wrong number? Well, yes, that can happen. But what you do is you teach people how to avoid those errors. You don't just throw the whole thing out.
Yeah.
I think that for those who are skilled developers, you go. Huge respect for you. Absolutely. Kudos, do that. But I don't think it's reasonable to expect that everyone's going to learn how to become a Python ninja to be able to do any type of analytics.
And not, you don't have to, right? Like Pat Gelsinger from Intel, I love his he had a keynote at CES, and he was talking about how we all use the weather app, but not many of us can code the weather app, and we don't have to. But
well, and if you look at Cassie Kozyrkov, who I'm a
Yeah.
huge fan of,
me too.
she uses
Fan club. You want to open up a fan club? A Cassie fan club?
I think we should, and I will be right there. I'll be VP or secretary or third assistant bottle washer, whatever you want.
Dustin and George, you guys can join Cassie fan
Absolutely.
Club. Go.
She talks about the ability to make microwave ovens.
I've seen her
The
talk.
ability to
in
use
person.
microwave ovens.
Yeah.
I think that's an apt description, an apt analogy.
Yeah.
And I think we need to allow more people to be able to touch the touchpads on the microwave oven. You need to provide training and guidance on how to solve the problem and how to do the things. But to completely cut off 80% of the population who doesn't know how to code on an IDE or a notebook, I don't think that's going to help us.
Okay, so gatekeepers, they're all standing there loud, that small group of them. And you've got Analytics Edge with your, I don't know what. Oh, we've got music, background music. This is good. Do you need to get that?
The interpretive dance section is back, Kate. I didn't get it in last time, so it's in this time.
So what do we do with these gatekeepers? Do we have to convince them that they need to loosen the reins? Do we need to rally the troops and say, you got to get your hands on those microwave buttons? How do we actually overcome this problem?
A couple things. I'm going to recommend an old book, but it is hugely helpful. It's called Power in and Around Organizations by Henry Mintzberg. Very old book.
Okay.
Talks about the power of gatekeepers and the difficulties of allowing folks who have control over resources, such as IT or finance, from running the entire organization. I think that the way we democratize some of it is, I think to some extent, the horse left the barn with ChatGPT and similar large language models, because people now can start to move in that direction. I think you can't say you either have to have everything or you can't play it all. You need to say, okay, here are the ground rules. Here's what you need to do. Here are the standards that we're going to hold you to. Here are the tests that you need to be able to do to be able to create analytics that we're going to trust, and then bring people in. We can't continue to say you need to be able to do everything before you can touch anything. I don't think that's
right. You've got to teach them the basics. Like I see Andrew Gibbs is here. He's saying people also need to know when to use the microwave versus other appliances, or how to, right? Like,
and when the thing doesn't need to be cooked in the first place. I have been in consulting to several organizations who say we need to have a predictive analytics model. Oh, okay. What do you need to do? And they'll tell me. I'll say, well, actually, I think you can handle that with just a report or a dashboard. And then I'll find out that they have actually already created the report or dashboard. It's just not getting in the right hands. So again, I come with a huge bias because I started in strategic planning. That was my focus. So I'm all about what's the problem? How can we make it simpler? That type of thing. That doesn't make me God's gift to machine learning at all. But what it does do is sort of say, make sure that we're on target for this. What do we need to get there? And in some cases, you're going to need a squad of ninja developers. And I thank God they're there. But I think we need to stop making everything as difficult as these gatekeepers want to make it. So some is giving people loosen up the reins and allow them to create their draft projects.
I mean, do you think there's a risk in just loosening up the reins and then?
Sure, there's a risk in anything. But I think that we have allowed people to use Excel fairly well. I think we've allowed most people to use email fairly well. I think we've allowed many people. A lot of folks don't remember that back in the early 1900s, they used to have the office of CEO, except it wasn't chief executive officer. It was chief electricity officer, because electricity came into manufacturing. They decided, no, electricity, we need to have a whole separate division. True story. I think that's a bit of overkill. I think that we can do things to make things more accessible. Think of like new product development with the phased gate approach, where you say, okay, to get to this stage, you need to be able to do this. To get to the second stage, you need to be able to do this. To get to the third stage. But saying to people, you can't enter any stage until you pass my laundry list.
Do you think there are some industries that are more gatekeeper-ish gatekeepery than others, like healthcare, for example, because if, that's a dangerous microwave oven that you could potentially, put a piece of metal in there and blow things up.
Yes, bad to boil the blood units in healthcare. Yes, bad. So what are the stakes? To some extent, people don't realize people have been doing analytics on their own for 40 years. They just called them spreadsheets. I think the confusion becomes, how much is the risk? How can we control it? How can we create the appropriate standards? How do we help people learn some of the introductory steps? Do we really need to have everyone do everything to be able to touch anything? The answer is no.
Right. And we had a follow-up question here on gatekeepers from Matthew. Regardless of the theory of gatekeepers, how do you enhance the curiosity about the domain and the low lift tooling to get to that end state?
What a fabulous question, Matthew. And by the way, my son is named Matthew, so I appreciate your choice.
Perfect. Of name. There you go. Is that your son?
How'd you get on here? Increasing the curiosity, I think it's a lot easier now than it has been before because of generative AI, and it's easier to grab people's attention. I think the problem is taking people on the journey with you. People support what they create. People support what they're involved in. People support what they understand. So bringing them in the beginning and finding out, don't say, I've got this amazing tool. Let me show you how I'm going to come in and tell you how to do your job and take all your control away. Won't that be fun? No, that doesn't go over well. Find out the challenges they have, what's important to them.
Yeah.
And start with the question, is this an appropriate use case for machine learning and AI? And a lot of times it isn't. So don't force it down their throats. You need to say, do you have data? Is there a problem we can help you with? Why don't we set up a project to see if this could work, as opposed to, I'm going to show you how to do your job differently.
Or take your job, right? Because that's another fear.
Well, think of the language we use. We talk about data literacy. Well, in theory, that's fine, but it automatically assumes that most of the world is illiterate. People do not.
I knew you were going to bring this up, Scott.
I know.
I know.
I've been waiting for my opportunity this whole time. So data
We're going to
literacy
put Scott backstage for a couple of minutes. Let him cool down.
See, I'm turning red. That's what's going on here.
So you don't like the word data literacy because you're assuming that people are illiterate and it's got a negative connotation, and you're like, well, they're not illiterate. They just don't know everything.
Right.
Actually.
You don't call people math illiterate, or I hope you don't. I think it's tricky. Also, you know what's coming next, Kate? The other one?
Data driven?
Yes! She's so good. That's why she's the host and I'm just the guest. Because people don't like to be driven. They like to drive. They don't like to be driven over the edge or driven to distraction.
What if you're like a passenger princess and you want to be driven and you don't want to drive? Not speaking from my own perspective, I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's certainly not the impression I have of you, Miss Kate.
Okay, good.
Yeah, well, if that is the case, then let the data drive all over the place. The problem.
No, but data-driven implies you're making decisions based on data, right? I actually had, I think this was a conversation. I'm not going to remember who exactly it was. This is the 15th episode in the past couple of weeks, right? So it sort of goes fast. But we were talking about how you shouldn't always be data-driven. Nothing against the terminology of data-driven. We were talking more about your personal experience and your gut reaction and how we've been sort of telling people to stop listening to their instincts and just look at the data. Where in some cases, I think it was Brian Evergreen, he talked about autonomous transformation, and he was talking about how we shouldn't always be data-driven, and we sometimes need to rely on our human instincts as well.
I think that's a component, but data-enabled, data-empowered.
What about, wait, George is asking, data-informed? Can we be informed by data?
I bet.
And what about the data literacy concept? Like, what are we calling that? What's your proposal here? If you don't like that term, you must have another in your mind.
Of course not. I just like to say everything is wrong. Remember, I'm here to say we're doing this wrong. No, I think that the concept of data literacy is something you're basically decision making, right? So make better decisions, better decision making.
That's it?
That's it.
Data-driven decision making?
Ooh, look at the time. Gotta go.
We still have 5 minutes. Hold on. Okay, so George had another question for you. What do you like to do most? Improve something or develop it from scratch? I'm assuming we're not talking about like baking cake. I think he's talking about
I love to bake.
you like to bake.
I'm a big bake guy. But even then I use cake mixes. So there you go.
Okay.
I would say that I like to improve things if they're working well already. Start from scratch when they don't. It sort of depends on what's already there. Many organizations get themselves in trouble by announcing to the world they're going to launch a major machine learning initiative. It crashes and burns. And the company doesn't say, oh, that particular project had this issue. Instead, they say, I knew this machine learning stuff was just a bunch of garbage and that it wouldn't work. And the organizations who are in that trap have an incredibly hard time getting the organization to change their minds. So in that case, better to create from scratch.
Got it. And you said change their minds. I have a whole other topic that I want to do maybe a whole separate conversation on, but the concept of change management.
Yes.
I think and I know we had generative AI before, but now it's like, now everyone knows about it and everyone's excited for it. What are your thoughts on actually implementing some of these changes in an organization? Because just because there's a great idea or, you have a good concept, it doesn't mean that organization is going to be like, oh, great. Yeah, we'll just change everything now. Like, what's your advice on dealing with some of those changes?
Usually as a consultant, I was brought in and someone would say, yeah, we want you to change things.
I was going to say, did we just bring in a bunch of consultants and you start with, when I was a consultant,
And the problem is what they really mean is, I want you, Miss Consultant, to come in and change what everyone else is doing. And I shouldn't have to change anything. That's what they're really saying. They're not in a really big hurry to change their own behaviors.
Right.
What they really want you to do is change everybody else. So I think you take it in small doses. You take it one step at a time. And again, you start with the problem and say, do I have a helpful solution? If you don't, you move on.
Yeah.
As opposed to, we're going to put Gen AI in the coffee machine. Yes, it's a top priority. Well, maybe it's a good idea. Maybe it's a bad idea. But, you probably operate the coffee machine without the whole Gen AI thing. I
mean, it would be great if Gen AI knew that it was me and had a conversation with me. And it is kind of like the water cooler chat. ChatGPT. I'm pretty sure that's coming, by the way. You're joking about it, but I'm pretty sure the next.
Well, a funny story. I did a presentation a couple of years ago, and I was trying to come up with the most ridiculous example I could come up with for using AI. And I thought a toaster. So I Googled it, and I'll be darned if in 2018 there wasn't a major company who is manufacturing an AI toaster to determine how done your bread was using optics. And I was like,
of course.
Really? Okay. What problem is this solving for me?
The doneness of your toast, obviously. You don't want it overdone. But sometimes we don't even know that they're fixing problems. Like, maybe it could be better. I know we could probably use those resources for bigger problems.
Right. But you always want to be helping with an aspirin, not with a vitamin. You want to be able to stop somebody's pain. As opposed to encouraging them to take something that they don't want to take in the first place. You want to help them by understanding what their needs are. And I'll tell you, expense reduction is always going to be your best option because they see it every week, every month, every whatever. We have to spend this much. And if you can prove that you can change it to this much, that's real. If you tell them we're going to make a bunch more revenue, we're going to create these incredible products. They're really excited in the beginning until it goes to sign the invoice.
Yes.
Well, really? You come in with a proposal where you can stop expenses. Much easier to do.
Any type of cost reduction, I agree, is very easy to show. And then it's easier to sign an invoice where you're saving them more than they're paying you. You're like, okay, no brainer. That's sort of a foot in the door and prove the concept. And then maybe you can go on and do bigger things. Guess what? We're almost out of time. I know, time flies. We'll take one last question from the audience and then one last question from me. So Dustin is saying, what headwinds do AI initiatives face due to legacy data quality issues. How do organizations overcome those to capitalize on the benefits of AI?
Data is the foundation of everything. If you've got bad data, it doesn't matter what technique you use to apply to the data. You need to fix the data first. So experts, just like George and Lights on Data, who are experts in terms of data governance and all that type of thing in other organizations, fix the data first, at least to the degree to solve a specific problem, then worry about what you're going to do with the data after that.
Wait, there's one more thing Dustin said. Hold on. We're going to keep this on screen probably for the rest of all of my shows. He thinks that everyone should be data-cated, not data-driven, not data-informed.
Oh, lovely indeed. Dustin, go Dustin.
I've trademarked that term, so imagine how many cups of coffee I can afford eventually.
It just brings a tear to my eye.
With generative AI built in, I can finally afford it. Thank you, Dustin. So Scott, I love our conversation. I mean, we go way back. Like I told people in the beginning, we met 5 years ago. Another great chat here with you. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but I do want to know, for people who want more of this, of that, where do they go?
I'm dedicated to helping organizations do training for their organizations, either for data scientists or more specifically for helping organizations train the rest of the folks outside of the data science field on how to take advantage of these things. LinkedIn is always the place to look for me. It's T. Scott Clendaniel altogether.
You said that so fast. You know, I was in the car with
my kids. It said there was a time limit. I was feeling the pressure, Kate. Come on.
We were listening to the radio, and my daughter's like, "Why do they talk so fast sometimes?" Because, you know, like when they're like exclusions, blah blah blah, and I'm like, "Oh,
because they're not dedicated, dear. That's why."
That's exactly it. We'll end on that note. Scott, the friendly neighborhood AI educator at Analytics Edge, thank you so much for being on the Dedicated Show. Thank you to the live audience for joining, and thanks for anyone who's watching this after we're done being live. I'm sure it's still as fun and as educational. Follow Scott on LinkedIn. That's all I'm going to say. That's how I'm ending this. Follow him. He posts every day. How many times a day do you post? You're like always.
I've gotten it down from 92. I'm actually down to basically one a day.
One a day. Okay, good.
It was a little wild and woolly there for a bit.
But if anybody comments on your post, what do you do after?
The heck with that.
Scott gets very excited.
Answer them. I'm a wild man.
It looks like you get very excited anytime somebody comments, because then the pictures start, the GIFs. It's very exciting. So definitely go and engage with Scott. Scott, thank you again
Scott
for being.
Taylor calls me Elvis because I'm always saying thank you very much.
Who's Elvis?
Nice.
Just kidding. All right, awesome. Well, thanks to everybody for joining. Stay dedicated. We will see you online. Right.